So, what does the future hold? Alright, new Doctor Who list. A couple of things about this one. The first is, this is the first one that the Patreon supporters helped decide on the topic. And by that I mean I actually have a rather lengthy list of lists that I intend to do eventually, mostly regarding Doctor Who. And because I try and do them at a pace of one a month, I've got a lot of options for what to do next. So I actually gave a few of those options out to Patreon, and they selected that this month I'm going to do my pick for 10 actors that I think would be good to play the Doctor. Now, before I get into these, none of these, strictly speaking, are wishes. I'm not, ooh, I hope they get it. This is just actors who I thought, yeah, maybe that could work. And now the other thing that I've tried to do is I have tried to keep this realistic, because there are actors of a certain, I don't want to say caliber, because it implies that being popular is also the same as being a good actor. That's not necessarily the same thing. But there's certain actors who are too high profile that just, they would never get. Not for, a 13 or even 10 episode series. That's supposed to come out every year or 2 years on a regular schedule. They just wouldn't get these people. So, I think Helen Mirren would be a fantastic Doctor. They're never going to get her. I think Idris Elba could be very good. They're never going to get him. So, I only allowed myself one indulgence on they would never get this person. I'm allowing myself one of those. The rest are ones who I think actually feasibly, at least in terms of the kinds of work they tend to do, might be able to do this part in terms of, just working the schedule. So, with that having been said, let's get to it. I've got 10 of these. I'll start at number 9, and I'll do what, in my mind, is kind of the obvious one. And I only say that because I feel like his name has come up the last few times we knew a regeneration was imminent. And that is Chris Marshall. Now, Chris Marshall is an actor who I know primarily from Love Actually. Not exactly his most Doctor-ish role, but there is something quite charming about him, and yet at the same time, a little bit off-putting. I mean, I don't want to sound mean about it, but the guy looks a little weird. And actually, that's a quality that I kind of would like to see the Doctor have again, because I don't think the Doctor, as a person, has really looked odd since Tom Baker. And, they've tried to make the Doctor occasionally dress odd, but that was a quality that Tom Baker had, because, he had that wide-eyed kind of wild look. And Chris Marshall has a bit of an odd, a bit of a distinct look to him. And I think that could be something interesting to play with. And having looked at, he's done a lot of theater work. He's branched out into drama. I think he could be quite interesting. Moving on from that, I should also mention, these are in absolutely no particular order. I'm not actually, working my way up to a number one pick, so do not take this ranking as meaning anything. So, next up, Olivia Colman. Now, back when we found out that Capaldi was going to be leaving and sort of the conversation started, will it be a woman? I had my thoughts about it at the time, which, eventually, changed and evolved and all that lovely stuff. But certainly one of my early thoughts was that, well, if it's gonna be a woman, I think Olivia Colman would be a good pick. And I still think that. She has a real intelligence in her eyes, and she's able to communicate thought processes very well, which I think is really good for any character who is supposed to be very intelligent and who gets through situations by figuring it out. To have an actor you can look at them and see the wheels turning in the head and kind of read it on their face, and I think she's quite good for that. I think she's just a good actress in general, and I've also seen her have a really good rapport with a pretty wide variety of other performers, which I think is also a good thing to have because, it really helps for the Doctor to have good chemistry with whoever they are sharing the screen with. So after that, this one, I've actually mentioned this one before. This one's kind of a holdover for me and one that I've given up on thinking this will ever happen, but I still kind of hope. And that's Paterson Joseph, who has actually appeared on Doctor Who before. He was in Bad Wolf and The Parting of the Ways. He was the guy who faced off against Rose in The Weakest Link. Not his best work or his best role, I don't feel. But, I first saw him in the Neverwhere BBC miniseries, which is okay. He is the highlight of that entire thing, though. He played the Marquis de Carabas. And that character, and especially the way he played it, was very Doctor-esque, very sort of swish and smooth and, fast-talking and in and out of danger and a little bit flippant, but with sort of this layer of kind of a dark history, a little bit of sadness to him that I found immediately mesmerizing, and I've always kind of wanted to see him play the Doctor because I felt like seeing Neverwhere and seeing him play the Marquis de Carabas was like a taste of what he could have been. I wouldn't expect the character to be exactly like that for him playing the Doctor, but I felt like it was almost a proof of concept to be like, oh, I would really like to see what he would do full on. But, what can you do? So moving on from there, my fourth one, this one kind of pushes the limits of like maybe too big for it, except that he's been doing more television in recent years, so why not? Jonathan Pryce. I have a soft spot for older Doctors. It was honestly part of the reason I really like Capaldi. That's not a knock on Smith or Tennant or Davison or the younger ones, but it's rare to find a young man who can bring that sense of age, and so knowing that you can't always find that, I do kind of lean towards a rascally older man. I think Jonathan Pryce would be really good for that. I think obviously he has a Doctor Who connection because he played the Master in the comedy sketch Doctor Who in the Case of the Curse of the Fatal Death. So he's got some association with Doctor Who, but I think that because again, he can convey intelligence really well. I mean, the whole subplot of the Sparrows in Game of Thrones, I didn't love, but I did love him as the High Sparrow because he sold that. He sold that charisma and that sincerity and that earnestness, that honestness that the character needed in order to work. And to see him bring that skill set to the Doctor, oh yeah, I'd be up for that. So next up, I've got one who I'm probably going to have to explain who this is, because I suspect most people don't know. Going from one of my older options to one of my younger, Luke Youngblood. Yeah, that is actually his real name. So actually, most people who watch this channel probably would remember him if you've seen the first two Harry Potter movies. He appeared in those. He was very young in those. So like the first Harry Potter movie, the kid who's on the mic announcing the Quidditch game, that's Luke Youngblood. Now, I know him from Gallivant, where he played Sid, the Squire, who was known for constantly having his song stepped on by other characters and for an amazing head of hair, which he absolutely does have. And I think that he would be a really interesting pick and would bring an interesting energy because he can be very squirrely, he's got a very nervous energy about him. And I think that it would be really interesting because this is based off what I saw of him in Gallivant, but he had this sort of timid, endearing nature where, he was kind of... It was really interesting to see because his character was timid. That was like kind of a fair part of his deal, but it's a musical. So obviously for the purposes of the song, he has to be boisterous and be charismatic and carry a tune and hold the camera while at the same time playing timid. And so that kind of contrast of like a little bit, staying back, a little bit squirrely, yet at the same time still commanding the screen despite that, I think that's a quality I'd be really curious to see applied to the Doctor. So next one up, this one, I don't know why. I just think it'd be cool. And that's Hugh Bonneville, who has been on Doctor Who before. He played, I forget the guy's name. He played the pirate in Curse of the Black Spot. But I mean, obviously at this point, Doctor Who has already cast people as the Doctor who have been on the show before, and I don't think they'd even have to explain his face the way they did with like Capaldi, because I mean he had this massive beard when he played the pirate. Just shave the beard, it'll be fine. But he can come across as having the weight of the world on his shoulders in a way that doesn't make it seem like he's like trying to be a martyr about it. But he just can have this sort of sense to him. And I kind of would be interested to see that sort of almost weariness about the Doctor, but like, it's not like he's not like having lost his sense of adventure, but just like, oh, the universe needs saving again. Okay. And have that kind of thing. I feel like he'd be good for that. And again, I know him from a couple of things. I know him from Paddington, and I also know him from Gallivant as well, because he played a pirate. I've seen him play a pirate twice, actually, now that I think of it. Maybe I just want the Doctor to be a pirate. Maybe that's why. Okay, so next up, Lena Headey. Best known at this point as Cersei Lannister on Game of Thrones. I've seen her in a few things, Game of Thrones obviously being one. I've seen her in Dread. She has a fearsome and frankly frightening energy about her. But while she has kind of become known for playing these very hard, cold characters, she is capable of warmer moments. But I do think that sort of steeliness, that, oh, wow, I really don't ever want to tick this person off, which the Doctor often has, but often you don't see it until you already have ticked them off. But I think it would be interesting to sort of see that element brought a little bit more to the forefront, and see that as more of the initial impression that the Doctor gives, as opposed to being something uncovered in the heat of the moment. I think something like that could be an interesting flip, where it's the Doctor's softness that comes out in the moment, as opposed to the harshness, which is the way I feel like it's usually been played, certainly in modern Who. Next up, going on the young end again, Ben Whishaw. I think he's just charming. I think he's just charming and endearing and kind of adorable. And I could just see him popping his head out of the TARDIS door for a peek around. I'm not sure I've got any real solid justification beyond just like being able to picture it so well. I actually don't know him from all that much. I mean, he voices Paddington. I think the only thing I've actually seen him in might be playing Q on some of the newer James Bond stuff, which he does quite well. And again, that does sort of bring in that element of being able to convey intelligence, which he does, and he does that well. But again, I don't know. I can just picture that one. That's the most justification I can give it. All right, we've only got a couple left. And next up, I'm going to talk about my freebie. This is the one of all the ones on this list that I'm like, yeah, no way does that ever happen. But it would be really cool. Tilda Swinton. I feel like it would almost kind of be a cool, fun sort of throw in the face of the whole, is it better if the doctor's a man, it's a woman? Should it go back to cast someone who has played so many androgynous characters so well? And that's kind of my hope for her playing the Doctor, to play it very gender neutral or gender flipped. Because, I think of Tilda Swinton and I tend to think of Gabriel from Constantine. I tend to think of Orlando. I tend to think of, or even the Ancient One, just this sort of mix of a very masculine and a feminine energy, and I would really kind of love to see that deliberately poured into the Doctor as a character, and just see what people make of it. Yeah, I think that would be cool. The last one is, this one occurred to me late, but then I thought of it and I was like, oh yeah. And that is Sean Pertwee. Yes, John Pertwee's son. Would it be nepotism? Maybe. I wouldn't care. I think partly because I actually think he would bring a very different energy to the Doctor than his father did. Because his father was very dapper, very dashing. He was a dandy. He was called that flat out in the show. But if you've ever seen anything with Sean Pertwee, he has a very rough and tumble, kind of street level, Cockney-ish energy to him. I first fell in love with Sean Pertwee when I saw Dog Soldiers. Even his Alfred on Gotham. Alfred! The epitome of the stuck-up British stuffy butler. He plays with that rough and tumble, put your dukes up energy that he just has. And that's not me saying that I think that if he were to play the Doctor that he should get in a lot of fights or anything, but I think just having that more scrappy energy would not only be really cool, but given how much he also in the face looks like his father, I think that would just kind of be really fun to have somebody who kind of looks like the third Doctor, but is very much doing their own thing. I think that would be really cool and fun. And I'll wrap it up there. So those are my 10 actors who I have no expectation that any of them ever will play the Doctor. I'm not saying place your bets, it'll be one of these. Nor am I saying I absolutely want one of these to be the Doctor after, and it's not one of these, I'll be disappointed. Not saying any of that, but this was just kind of a fun exercise. So what about you? Who do you think would be a good Doctor? Would be fun in the part? Would be cool? Would be a change of pace, whatever you think, whoever you think would be neat to see, or whatever you think about the ones I put out there, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. A whole bunch of stuff that you can do, because buttons, links, one to the Patreon. Any amount of support is absolutely appreciated. Also, P.O. Box and a whole bunch of other links are all down there, so check them out if you want. If you don't, that's okay. Because you know what? At the end of the day, you're the council. I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.